Jas, and I work for OpenAthens as a product manager. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how we applied user-centered design to improve our understanding of users. And what is user-centered design? So it's a term that's used to refer to a collection of methods that essentially put users at the center of product and service development. We used it in the early stages of validating a new product proposition. So the proposition is OpenAthens Lite, and the proposal is to split OpenAthens into tiers, so we can develop a product/tier that closer aligns to the needs of smaller libraries, with a particular focus of those in the global south. So the methods we used include assumption mapping, interviews, questionnaires, and user personas. So assumption mapping provides an early focus on users. So we got together a team of colleagues from different parts of the business, and we looked at what our assumptions are in relation to OpenAthens Lite. By assumptions, I mean things that we think to be true without any evidence. And in particular, we looked at the business feasibility. So that's can we practically deliver Light? What are does it build on our current technical capabilities? Viability is in relation to whether it's a good business decision to develop OpenAthens Lite. Is it sustainable? All those sorts of questions. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly to user-centered design, is the desirability. Is this something that users actually want? Is this something they desire? Does it resolve an issue for them? So we used Miro to put sticky notes on our assumptions down, and we then put them on a matrix which shows them in relation to the importance of the assumption versus the difficulty to test them. And then I began testing some of the assumptions with user interviews. So um, I use LinkedIn to source participants, since uh, those individuals that work in smaller libraries in the global south are not our typical customer at the moment. So use LinkedIn to source those participants, and we got some really rich and detailed insights as a result of the 4 interviews that we did. But this is a rather small sample size. The insights were rich, as we were able to probe and ask questions about things that we found of interest, and to get clarity on some of the things we were unsure of. The downside was that, yeah, as I mentioned, the sample size was small, so it was hard to draw generalizations out of those interviews, and the output was non-statistical. So again, it's difficult to use in comparison purposes. And with interviews, you have to be careful that you have a limited time, so you want to make sure all the information that you want, you're able to gather, and also you want to limit your biases in asking the question. So we created a interview guide before going into these interviews, which helped give our interviews some structure. We also made a list of the assumptions, and so after each interview we could go through each of them and decide whether, based on that interview, the assumption was approved or rejected, or something that we needed some more information on. And due to the small sample size and the nature of interviews, we felt that we needed to validate findings further. So we created a questionnaire and used LinkedIn targeted search to reach a much larger sample size. As you can see, we just used Microsoft Forms, and we received over 200 responses. And the good thing about this was that the results were ones that we could use and draw some meaningful generalizations out of. For example, we found that we had an assumption that most of the resources these users would require are local, when in fact 71% subscribe to less 20% national resources, which is obviously a very interesting consideration in product development. And then our assumption was they'd subscribe to a limited number of e-resources, when in fact the split was almost 50-50 between those that subscribe to less than 20 and those that subscribe to more than 20. Obviously, that provides very useful insight to us, because it suggests that perhaps in this market there is room for both OpenAthens Lite and our product as is. And then we also used user personas to help us with communicating and summarizing our research. So user personas are essentially fictitious characters that represent a real audience. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Daisy. So Daisy is a librarian in a small academic institution in the Global South. She's passionate about educating her patrons about academic research, and she's always keen to evidence the value of the library to her colleagues and her superiors. Some key highlights is that patrons in her institution tend to use their smartphones to access the internet, and during lockdown she's been relying more on WhatsApp and Teams to communicate with her patrons. One pain point that she has is that IT library systems are not, and IT and library systems are not integrated, so this can sometimes cause her some issues with getting things, getting systems and processes aligned. So important question is, what will we do with these insights? Well, our aim is to design a product that meets the needs of Daisy. Now we know a little bit more about Daisy, and in some regions there's a need to have a product in local languages. In others it's less of an issue, where other languages might be spoken but English is the main business language. There's a need for patrons to access both international and local resources against most in most of the users we spoke to and in most regions. And then lastly, the product needs to be mobile optimized, because the reliance on smartphones in some of these regions is a lot more than in markets where OpenAthens currently is more widely used. So in terms of next steps, we will be taking this user insight and using it to support us in product development, and we will now continue validating the business viability and the technical feasibility. Thank you very much, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Jake now, who will talk you through some of the other items that we're going to be exploring as a product team. Thank you.
Hope everyone is enjoying themselves at Access Lab today. I'll kick off my presentation with just a little bit about me. My name's Jas Smallridge and I'm product manager here at OpenAthens, and I look after our publisher and learner and researcher products. My presentation is going to kind of carry on the theme of Jas and Andy's by keeping the focus very much on the users of our products. I want to look at what the future holds for OpenAthens, especially how we look to become more focused on the ultimate users of our products, learners and researchers. I'll start by giving a little bit of background and context to the shift in focus for us, and then give some detail about what this means for our product roadmap. At OpenAthens, our mission is to help people achieve great things by removing barriers to knowledge. This guides our thinking and decision making at every stage of the product development process. We see ourselves as sitting in the middle of a triangle that connects learners and researchers, libraries, and publishers and service providers, all for the aim of removing barriers to knowledge. We enable the access that sits at the core of these relationships, and whilst it's publishers and libraries that pay us directly for our services, it's learners and researchers who are the ultimate users of our products. It's this rebalancing of our focus onto learners and researchers that I want to talk about today. This shift in focus not only keeps us true to our mission to remove barriers to knowledge, but also benefits our customers by having a partner that understands the needs of their ultimate customers and brings products that helps to drive engagement and usage. But why are we making this shift? Simply put, learners and researchers have been getting a raw deal in terms of the experience they receive for far too long. This poor experience can be shown in a number of ways. Today I want to highlight just two. Firstly, there's this great piece of research by Elsevier that looks at trust in research and aims to understand how researchers find and consume academic content today. There's quite a few numbers on here, but I want to highlight the main two in red. At the top, you can see that researchers spend on average just over 4 hours a week discovering content and almost 5.5 reading it. But at the bottom in that red square, you can see that actually half of what they read isn't useful to them. So in total, researchers are spending about 10 hours a week finding and reading content, 5 hours of which is wasted in content that they don't feel is useful. This is just one example of a system that doesn't work well for researchers. It's not helping them to work effectively, and it's symptomatic of a system that makes access to content too difficult. Another way this dissatisfaction with the status quo shows up is in the use of platforms like Sci-Hub. At this point, of course, cue the obligatory conference slide on the rise of Sci-Hub, which has become a cliche, but only because of its continued relevance in these types of discussions. The rise of Sci-Hub can be as much explained by the poor experience people get trying to access content as it is to do with not having access in the first place. Sci-Hub use is still significant even amongst students and researchers with access to the content through their university. Similarly, studies have shown that open access articles are cited at a much higher rate than non-open access articles, again indicating that ease of access is a key driver in engagement with content. If the experience for learners and researchers was smoother for paywall content, it's likely that Sci-Hub would not need to exist, or at least not be as popular as it is. So that's just two really quick examples of how the current system serves end users poorly and the impact of that. And overall, that's just creating more barriers to knowledge. This poor experience isn't going unnoticed though. Just last year, STM's latest Tech Trends report highlighted that a focus on the user was a key industry trend for the industry to keep a real focus on. And just anecdotally, we know that these conversations around user experience and journeys to content are becoming more common with our customers and within the industry more generally. So that gives a little bit of the rationale for why we think it's important to increase our focus on the end users of our products. And now to link this back to OpenAthens, what does this shift in focus mean for our roadmap and the product development we're doing at the moment? There's two main initiatives that I want to talk about today. Firstly, the MyAthens redevelopment, and second, our integration with seamless access. Starting with MyAthens, this is a product we've had for around 15 years, and we're in the process of completely rebuilding the product from the ground up. MyAthens is a product that gives students and researchers easy access to all of the resources available to them via OpenAthens, and also serves as a lightweight and easy to manage portal for library administrators to offer to their patrons as a starting point for their research. This rebuild is centered around giving a top quality experience for administrators and learners and researchers so that they can access the content that they want seamlessly. In addition to the improved experience, we'll also be adding a range of new features, including integration with a wider diversity of discovery services and the ability for administrators to curate important resources for their patrons. We believe there's a real opportunity to offer institutions and organisations of all sizes a user-focused product that takes the hassle and time out of guiding people to the content that they care about. We'll launch the new user-focused version of MyAthens around May this year, so it's not far away at all, and you'll be hearing a lot more about this exciting product launch in the coming weeks and months. The second part I want to focus on is our integration with seamless access. This is our first time talking publicly about this piece of work, and we're really excited to be part of this initiative, which aims to create a unified experience for patrons across publisher sites to smooth that journey to content as much as possible. For those in the audience unfamiliar with Seamless Access, it's an initiative that was started off the back of a piece of work conducted by NISO called RA21 that looked to see how the industry could create a more streamlined access experience when using scholarly collaboration tools, information resources, and shared research infrastructure, tackling a lot of those issues I mentioned earlier about poor experience within the industry. To bring that to life a little bit and to explain what our integration with Seamless Access entails, you can see on the screen here a really kind of high-level user flow for Seamless Access. So on the left, you've got Seamless Access button, which is an attempt to create a uniform and standardized approach to institutional sign-in on publisher sites. So first-time users will click on that standard button and get taken to a discovery service, in this case, our Wayfinder discovery service. The user can then select their institution, and in doing that, our integration with Seamless Access will inform them what institution has been selected. So in future, on any Seamless Access enabled site, the user's institution will be remembered and they'll be taken directly to a sign-in page when they click the Seamless Access button. Our integration makes joining the Seamless Access ecosystem incredibly simple for our customers that use Wayfinder, because Wayfinder handles all of the integrations and interactions with Seamless Access in the background, minimizing the development effort involved as much as possible. We're really excited to get this out into the hands of our customers because it's directly addressing those significant user experience issues that I spoke about earlier in my presentation. We're currently doing a trial implementation with the Institute of Physics to work out any kinks and hope to have a full rollout of the service in the next few months. So that's just two initiatives that I wanted to highlight today that demonstrated our increased focus on making sure that we deliver the best experience possible for our patrons, researchers, and students. And I just wanted to put this slide up again, so I think it reinforces that message that we all have a role to play in making sure that we remove as many barriers to knowledge as possible for learners and researchers. And I hope today's presentations from myself, Andy, and Jas have shown that we here at OpenAthens want to be your partners in removing those barriers to knowledge, and we hope that you're excited about the future as we are. Thank you very much for your time. See on the screen here, I've got a link to a Trello board, which is our public roadmap, which you can go and look at any time. And I've also got my email address on there if you've got any questions or follow-up you want to ask me outside of this. Now I think it's time for questions.
I'm Andy Anson. I'm the data analyst on the OpenAthens team. I'm here today to talk about what we saw in the user access statistics when the lockdown started last year. I'm sure it's not going to be a big surprise when I say that they went up. That they went up is not really surprising, but where it gets interesting is in the way they went up and what that could mean. Let's start with some background. Now, you have your own view via the reporting interface, but what we do at the service level, for the kind of things you'd expect, is to generate a monthly list of how many times each resource has been accessed by each organisation. I get a flat list like this, although it's about 60,000 lines longer. Now we combine that data with other things we know about you, such as which country you're in, whether you're an education site or a hospital, and so on. And we use that to organise the data into more meaningful insights. The one we're going to be looking at today is the average number of resource transfers per customer per month. Now we average it by customer for this, so that the number of customers is less of a factor. It's not perfect as it depends a little on the sizes of the customers that come on board in any given year, but it's a simple way to iron out enough of the differences to show year-on-year changes. And this is the line for 2016, and spoiler alert, there's a lot of room above it for a reason. Okay, if we add in 2017, we might say, small growth, bit of a pattern there maybe. If we add in 2018 and 2019, we can be fairly confident that there's a dip in the summer and a peak around about the time that the Northern Hemisphere starts a new academic year. Lots of new users finding out what they can access before they settle down into the things they need to regularly access. As you can see, the numbers are, in general, a bit higher each year as more and more people from each organisation engage with the system. The leading theory on that is that more people are telling each other about what they can do, i.e. those who are engaged will encourage more people to become engaged. Whatever the reason, I think we can safely call it a trend, though. So, at the start of 2020, when things were kicking off, what did we expect to see? Well, there were some in the team who thought that there would be an immediate huge increase because of working from home and the like. And they were a little frustrated when I told them we probably wouldn't be able to see the evidence of that until May because, well, we had to wait for the end of a complete month of lockdown to be sure that that was connected. There were others on the team who thought access nets might actually go down for April, given that our two largest sectors are education, who were taking most of April off and might not have been coming back for the summer term, and healthcare, who were, and well, still are, busy. As we got through April, we settled on a consensus that the two were probably going to cancel each other out to a greater or lesser extent. And everyone was getting quite interested in finding out what was going on. Okay, this is where we were, and this is what we saw for April. It was an inconclusive February. March may have been normal. There was a huge jump in April. Obviously, we would have all preferred it to be for different reasons, but as some among us pointed out, May would be the telling one. Here's the rest of the year, and May was indeed a month that happened. What does all this mean? Well, there was a spike, but that quickly returned to a normal pattern of use, albeit a more engaged one than we would otherwise have predicted. My interpretation is that those libraries who were already set up with OpenAthens or similar didn't have to worry about suddenly needing remote access. That part was covered, it was in place, and they could concentrate on making any changes they needed to elsewhere to give their end users and patrons the best service they could. In case you're wondering about the filters on the right, they don't make a big difference to the overall numbers for 2020. Healthcare understandably had a slightly lower engagement, and whilst the Southern Hemisphere does have a different academic year, we don't yet have enough customers there to smooth those lines out. Okay, we've looked at the analytics, which is what happened, but statistics is about taking that data and making predictions, so here are mine. First off, I am not expecting the engagement rate to go down. Once people get used to being able to do something that helps them, they tend to keep doing it, and, as I suggested earlier, those who are engaged will lead to more people becoming engaged. Okay, you're going to find it slightly easier to justify remote access in the budget. And we're going to see more and more services becoming federated in the future. Not only has the increased pressure on remote access highlighted the shortcomings of some systems, but libraries that haven't had anything at all, as they come on board, they'll tend to go for the newer technologies, such as SAML. And Jas is going to touch on that a little bit later. Okay, now that was our story in the stats for 2020, but with the reporting interface, OpenAthens gives you the tool to tell your own stories. And that will help you to make the best decisions to provide the best service and the best experience for your users and patrons. Some of the things you can do here are, this is an example of something being broken down by resource, but you can break it down by anything where you've got data in OpenAthens. All you have to do is tell us that that data should be reportable. You can do things like department, job role, cohort, course, favorite film, whatever. If you have an external tool that crunches data together, that's fine too. If you wanted to make a user-specific attribute reportable so you could get the data from one into the other, that's fine, subject to local rules and so on. We even give you an API so you can pull those reports automatically in a nice computer-friendly format. This is just some bars because I don't know about you, but I've not been in one for a while. This one is authentication, signing into OpenAthens itself rather than going off to a vendor service. So this tells you how many sessions your users are doing in a month or a day or even an hour if you break it down that far. And from this one we can see the little dotted line at the bottom, that's unique or distinct users. So for this particular university there are the users are starting a lot of sessions. If you want to find out more about the reporting interface, is all covered in the online documentation, and there's even a course in our VLE that will teach you more. All that remains now is for me to say thank you and to say that questions are going to be collected and all answered at the end of the 3 sessions together. I've been Andy Anderson. Thank you very much.
2 Andys presenting side by side. Who would have thought it? Anyway, thank you everybody. Thanks for bearing with us while we had a few technical issues. We do have some time for a Q&A. We've still got sort of 8 minutes or so, 7.5 minutes to go through the. Thank you all for dropping some questions in. I'm going to dive straight in. So there is a question here for. Sorry, the question is for Jas. The question is, I like the idea of the user personas. How much of these personas were data-driven and how much were they created anecdotally or based on experience, Jas? Can't hear your audio, Jas.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was going to say that's a really interesting question, and so most of the personas were shaped by the data we got from the user interviews, which were there wasn't many of them, but that's where most of the data came from. And in terms of it, it does align with the things that we've heard anecdotally as well, and some of the research that we've also done previously. But in terms of it being shaped by perhaps my experiences or things that I've had in the past, scope for that may have been limited because I just started in the team in OpenAthens, so I kind of was able to approach it with a fresh perspective. But I can imagine once you get to know users, then perhaps bits of what you've researched in the past may feed into that as well. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Jas. And so there is a sort of follow up to this. So it says the local language aspect of the DAISY persona is interesting. Could this lead to a multilingual OpenAthens UX for both end users and admin? And the comment is Welsh would be of great interest to us.
Potentially. So at this stage, we looked at desirability. So what do users desire? And that's coming back as something that, that we think users want. But then we also have to look at like technical feasibility and how and where and when we would be able to deliver that. So in short, potentially, but when is undefined and how is undefined.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Jas. So this can be a question for you, Andy, I reckon. So it says, from my experience, I have to download the XLS data if I want to target a specific patron. Couldn't OpenAthens implement a dynamic search that would pull up that patron data? Yeah, does that make sense, Andy?
It does. It's one of those things that's a little bit more complicated to explain than you might have thought, but luckily the best person to decide whether or not it's a good idea is just down there. It's Jas. She's the product manager. She can decide it. It wouldn't actually be significantly quicker to do it because the entire data set would still have to load first, and loading the entire data set into the browser can actually take longer than downloading the data into a spreadsheet and searching that way. So if you've got a lot of users or a lot of activity in your stats, it might not actually save you any time to do it. But I can certainly see that doing something with any reportable attribute in the same way as resources can be individually chosen to highlight on there would be a useful thing. That's a very good idea, Frank. Thank you.
I mean, does I sort of follow up to that, Andy? I mean, if Frank was able to use the reports API call that we have and could pull that data into a sort of separate kind of data analytics system like Tableau or others, would that make that process of finding an individual sort of patron easier potentially?
It would, yes, because the data would already be pre-downloaded.
Okay. Cool. So that's, yeah, if that's something you want to follow up with, Frank, we can certainly do that. So this is quite a long question. So this is for you, Jake. It says the Seamless Access initiative has ironically made it more difficult for NHS staff to log in. It asks for their institution, and the question is how does someone who is a doctor at a local NHS trust view their institution? So there's a follow-up comment which says, guaranteed this will be their local trust name, in which case they will not find anything. They have to select NHS England instead. are there any initiatives to address how accounts that are located within a hierarchy surfaced within that kind of seamless access initiative, Jake?
Yeah. So there's a few bits there. I guess around on the sort of language point around institution, that is something that is kind of on seamless access's radar, because institution doesn't necessarily always kind of make sense to everyone, especially kind of outside of education and corporate customers and health sector, for example. So that is definitely something that's on the radar. In terms of the selection of the institution, it'd be good to kind of to see a little bit of kind of some examples. We do have a workshop with the sort of wider seamless access initiative next week that might be good to share some of that stuff at. So if you've got any examples, my email address is just jake.smallridge@openathens.net. It'd be good to see, because I think with our wayfinder they should be able to drill down into that when they search. But obviously, some publishers will be using their own discovery service that they've built themselves, which might not have that level of granularity. And that is something where they can have that granularity. They just need to do the work to make it available. So that's definitely something that's definitely worth flagging. So if you've got the sort of specific examples, that'd be really useful.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's that the ability is there to search within a hierarchy at different sort of different levels. But essentially the follow up to that is that we need the publishers to implement that functionality. So I guess the functionality exists within the products. We need to work with our publishing partners to sort of start rolling that out on a wider basis. Great. Okay. Thanks, Jake. And so there's we've got a little bit more time. I'll throw one more question to you, Jas. So the question was, can you give us a bit of an overview of how that user-centered design approach that you sort of presented earlier is different from, I suppose, more traditional design principles? What kind of really stands out when you take a user-centered approach?
I would say that in taking a user-centered approach, we start with the user. So right from the get-go with the assumption mapping, the focus was on what we think we know about the user and and then validating that, and then all of the work that we do subsequent to that is focused around that. And then as we develop the product, we keep going back to that same kind of core.
And so as you sort of go through those different iterations, we talked a little bit earlier about the kind of coming into a UX project with some assumptions. I suppose you get the opportunity to test those assumptions as you work through the process with the end user.
Yeah, and then getting them involved at at the different stages of the product development.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that we've had. So thank you everybody for submitting your questions, and also thanks for your patience sticking with us while we sorted out a few hitches. So the next session will be starting, I think, at 1:30. If you click the sort of back to timeline button, that will sort of take you back to the main agenda, and you can sort of jump into to the next session. But I take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers today. Thank you for presenting some interesting stuff around the products with OpenAthens, and look forward to joining everybody else with the session that's coming up. Thank you.